The girl stumbled into Deadwood with blood on her dress and terror in her eyes. She found the gunslinger in a saloon and whispered 6 words that would start a war. "He'll kill me if you don't help." John Trafford hadn't saved anyone in years, until now. The saloon doors exploded inward just as the sun bled into the horizon, turning Deadwood's main street the color of rust and old wounds. John Trafford didn't look up from his whiskey. He'd learned long ago that trouble announced itself loud enough without him going to meet it halfway. But then he heard the breathing, ragged, desperate, the sound of someone who'd run until their lungs burned. "Please." The voice was young, female, terrified. Trafford finally raised his eyes. The girl stood 3 feet from his table, swaying like she might collapse. 16, maybe 17. Dark hair matted with sweat and dust. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and blood, dried brown now, streaked down from a split lip. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Wide, dark, and filled with the kind of fear that came from knowing exactly what waited if she failed. "Please," she whispered. The saloon had gone quiet. Every eye was on her, then on Trafford. He was a lean man, weathered by sun and violence, with gray threading through his dark hair and a reputation that kept most people at a distance. He'd come to Deadwood to disappear, not to be found. "Don't do charity work," Trafford said, his voice flat. The girl's face crumpled, but she didn't move. "He bought me." Trafford's hand tightened on his glass. "He's Cyrus Dalton," she continued, her voice breaking. "He bought me from my stepfather for $200 and a fake mining claim. The wedding's Sunday, 3 days." Tears cut tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Please, I'm too small to be his wife." The words hit Trafford like a fist to the gut. Too small. His sister had said the same thing 15 years ago, standing in her father's house, begging not to be married off to a man 3 times her age. She'd been 15, dead at 16, her body broken by childbirth. Trafford looked at the girl, really looked at her, small-framed, barely a woman, with that same desperate hope his sister had worn. He drained his whiskey and stood. "What's your name?" "Rose," she breathed. "Rose Kimball." "All right, Rose Kimball," Trafford said quietly. "Let's get you out of sight." Trafford led Rose through the back alleys of Deadwood as darkness swallowed the town. She moved like a hunted animal, flinching at every sound, every shadow. He didn't speak until they reached the eastern edge of town, where the land sloped upward into the Black Hills. "Where are we going?" Rose whispered. "Somewhere Dalton won't think to look." The entrance to the Homestake Tunnel was half hidden by scrub pine and fallen timber. Trafford pulled aside a rotted beam and revealed a narrow opening in the hillside. He lit a lantern and descended into the darkness. Rose hesitated, then followed. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, dry, cool, forgotten. Old mining equipment lay scattered in corners, and the air smelled of earth and time. Trafford set down a bundle he'd carried, blankets, dried meat, a canteen of water, matches. "This shaft's been abandoned for 2 years, he said. "No one comes here. You'll be safe." Rose wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the blankets. "Why are you helping me?" Trafford didn't answer right away. He busied himself arranging the supplies, checking the lamp oil. "My stepfather isn't my real father," Rose said quietly, needing to fill the silence. "He married my mother 3 years ago. She died 6 months back from pneumonia." Her voice cracked. "Frank waited exactly 2 weeks before he sold me to Dalton. Said I was payment for a debt,
but I know he got cash, too." "Dalton own much of Deadwood?" asked Trafford. "Half of it. The mines, the freight company, 3 saloons. Sheriff Porter's in his pocket. He's got 12 men who do whatever he says." Rose looked up at him, eyes glistening. "You can't fight him alone." "Don't plan to fight him," Trafford said. "Just plan to keep you hidden until we figure something else out." "Why?" Rose pressed. "Why risk this for me?" Trafford met her gaze, and for a moment something old and painful flickered in his eyes. "Had a sister once," he said quietly. "She said the same thing you did." He didn't elaborate. Rose didn't ask.
Morning light turned Deadwood's muddy streets to gold, but there was nothing beautiful about the scene unfolding in front of the Grand Central Hotel. Cyrus Dalton sat astride a black stallion, flanked by 6 armed men, his face carved from granite and fury. Frank Kimball stood in the street below him, hat in hands, looking like a man who'd bet everything on the wrong hand. "She was in the house when I went to sleep," Frank stammered. "I swear it, Mr. Dalton. I locked her door myself." Dalton's voice was cold, precise. "And yet this morning she's gone. She must have climbed out the window. You let her escape." Dalton leaned forward in his saddle. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" The crowd gathering on the sidewalks watched in silence. Trafford stood among them, hidden in the shadow of the assay office, his face carefully blank. Dalton raised his voice so everyone could hear. "I'm offering $300 to anyone who finds Rose Kimball and returns her to me. The wedding will proceed as planned Sunday morning, with or without her consent." He paused, letting that sink in. "And anyone found hiding her will be tried for theft of property and hanged." Sheriff Porter emerged from his office, a wiry man with a badge that meant less than the money in Dalton's pocket. He began nailing wanted notices to every post and wall, Rose's name, her description, the reward. Dalton's eyes scanned the crowd, and for a brief, terrible moment, they passed over Trafford, then moved on. The crowd dispersed slowly. Trafford waited until the street cleared, then walked back toward his boarding house. He found May Sutton waiting on his porch, a sharp-eyed woman who owned the Lucky Strike and knew everyone's business. "You hidin' that girl, John?" May asked quietly. Trafford's hand moved toward his gun. May raised both hands. "Easy. I'm not here to turn you in." I glanced toward the street, "but Dalton will tear this town apart looking for her. You know that, right?" Trafford said nothing. May sighed. "Just be careful. Men like Dalton don't lose. They burn everything down instead." Rose was too small to be a wife, but brave enough to run. Will Trafford's protection be enough? Subscribe to see how this deadly game of hide-and-seek ends.
The knock came at noon, hard, deliberate, the kind that wasn't asking permission. Trafford opened the door to find Dalton flanked by Sheriff Porter and 2 hired guns. Dalton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Trafford," Dalton said pleasantly, "mind if we come in?" "I do." Dalton's smile thinned. "We're looking for a missing girl, Rose Kimball, 16 years old. You seen her?" "Lot of people pass through Deadwood." "That's not an answer." Trafford leaned against the doorframe, his hand casually near his holster. "It's the only one you're getting." Sheriff Porter stepped forward. "Now see here, Trafford." "Sheriff," Trafford interrupted, his voice soft but edged with steel. "You know my reputation. You know what I did before I came here. You really want to push this?" Porter went pale. Even Dalton's hired guns shifted uncomfortably. John Trafford's name carried weight in the territories. 14 confirmed kills, all men who'd made the mistake of drawing first. Dalton studied him with cold calculation. "I heard you retired from that life. Retirement's negotiable."
The silence stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Finally, Dalton stepped back. "If I find out you're lying to me, Trafford, I'll bury you in those mines you're so fond of." His voice dropped. "Sunday morning, that girl becomes my wife, one way or another." They left. Trafford watched them ride away, then grabbed his coat and headed for the tunnels. Rose was pressed against the far wall when he descended, her face white. "I heard voices. They echoed down through the rock. Were they looking for me?" "Yes." "What did you tell 'em?" "Nothing." Trafford sat on an old crate, exhaustion pulling at him. "But we can't hide forever. Dalton's not gonna stop." "Maybe I should just—" "No." Trafford's voice was firm. "We find another way." "What way?" Trafford thought of May, her connections, her whispered networks beyond Deadwood. "I know someone who might help, someone with reach beyond this town." Rose looked at him with desperate hope. "You really think we can stop him?" Trafford met her eyes. "I think we have to try."
May Sutton poured whiskey into 2 glasses and slid one across the bar to Trafford. The Lucky Strike was empty this early, just the 2 of them and the morning light filtering through dusty windows. "You're asking me to put my neck on the line," May said. "I'm asking you to do what's right." May laughed, bitter. "Right doesn't pay bills in Deadwood, John. Dalton does." She paused, studying him. "But I already stuck my neck out 3 weeks ago." Trafford straightened. "What do you mean?" "Sent word to the U.S. Marshal's office in Rapid City. Told them about Dalton's operation, the claim jumping, the fraudulent deeds, and the 2 miners who disappeared after refusing to sell their stake." May's voice dropped. "A marshal named Sarah Garrett responded. Said she's investigating, but I don't know when she'll arrive." "Could be too late." "Could be." May took a drink. "Or it could be exactly what you need. Dalton's scared of federal law. It's the one thing his money can't buy." Trafford nodded slowly, hope kindling in his chest. "Keep me informed if you hear anything." That evening, Trafford brought Rose fresh bread and water. She was sitting in the lamplight, writing on scraps of paper he'd brought her, anything to keep her mind occupied. "What are you writing?" he asked. Rose looked up, almost embarrassed. "Just thoughts, stories maybe. I always wanted to write, to tell people stories." Her voice softened. "My mother used to say I had a gift for words." Trafford saw something in her then, not just fear, but fire, potential. "You'll get that chance," he said quietly. "You'll write your stories, Rose. I promise you that." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Why do you care so much?" Trafford thought of his sister, buried in an unmarked grave in Kansas, of promises he'd failed to keep. "Because someone should have cared about my sister, and no one did." Outside, in the gathering darkness, Dalton's men moved through Deadwood like wolves, searching the outskirts, the abandoned buildings, getting closer to the hills, getting closer to the mines. The explosion of gunfire shattered the night. Trafford had just entered the tunnel when he heard boots scraping on rock above him. He grabbed Rose's arm and pulled her deeper into the darkness, extinguishing the lantern. "Found the entrance!" a voice shouted from above. "She's down here!" 3 men descended into the tunnel, guns drawn, lanterns swinging. Trafford recognized them, Dalton's hired killers, men who'd do anything for money. "Come out, girl," one of them called. "Mr. Dalton just wants what's his." Trafford positioned Rose behind a support beam, then stepped into the corridor. His voice echoed cold through the stone. "Turn around and leave." The lead man raised his lantern, illuminating Trafford's face. Recognition dawned, then fear. "Trafford, Dalton said you might be. Leave, now." "Can't do that." The man's hand moved toward his gun. "Orders are orders." Trafford drew first. The tunnel erupted in thunder and muzzle flash. The first man went down with a bullet through his chest.
The second managed to fire, his shot ricocheting off stone inches from Trafford's head. Trafford's return shot caught him in the throat. The third man turned to run. Trafford wounded him in the leg, and he collapsed, screaming. The gunfire echoed through Deadwood like drums of war. Trafford dragged the wounded man to the entrance and shoved him out. "Tell Dalton what happened here. Tell him I'll kill every man he sends." The man crawled away, bleeding, terrified. Rose emerged from the shadows, shaking violently. She'd never seen death before, not like this, brutal and close. Trafford's shoulder was bleeding where a bullet had grazed him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you had to see that." Rose shook her head, tears streaming. "You saved me." For now, Trafford looked toward the entrance, toward Deadwood below. But Dalton knows for certain now. Tomorrow he'll come with everything he has. May arrived an hour later with bandages and whiskey. She cleaned Trafford's wound, her face grim. 3 men dead, the whole town's talking. Dalton's gathering his men. She met Trafford's eyes. "Tomorrow at dawn, he's coming with all 12. He says he'll burn you out if he has to." Trafford nodded slowly. The final confrontation was coming. There was no avoiding it now. 3 men dead, 12 more coming at dawn. Can one gunslinger protect Rose from an army? Subscribe to witness the showdown that will decide everything.
Dawn broke cold and merciless over Deadwood. John Trafford stood on the steps of the assay office, alone, his hand resting on his holster. Behind him, Rose remained hidden in May's back room, watching through a crack in the shutters. Cyrus Dalton came like a king leading an army. 12 armed men flanked him on horseback. Behind them rode Sheriff Porter, and beside Dalton sat a portly man in a black suit, Judge Samuel Crane, his face already wearing the smug satisfaction of a decision bought and paid for. Frank Kimball trailed at the rear, looking anywhere but at the assay office. Dalton reined his horse to a stop 20 feet from Trafford. The street had filled with townspeople, drawn by the promise of violence or justice, they weren't sure which. "Last chance, Trafford," Dalton called out. "Hand over the girl and ride out. I'll let you live." "No." Judge Crane cleared his throat and held up a document. "I have here a legal marriage certificate, signed and sealed. The union between Cyrus Dalton and Rose Kimball is binding under territorial law." "She's 16, Trafford said, his voice carrying across the silence, "and she never agreed." "Her guardian agreed," Judge Crane said primly. "That's sufficient." Dalton's smile was razor-sharp. "You see, Trafford, the law's on my side. You're the criminal here." He gestured to his men. "Now you can hand her over, or we'll take her, and we'll bury you in the process." Trafford's hand moved slightly closer to his gun. 12 against 1. He'd beaten worse odds, but not by much. His eyes found Rose through the window, small, terrified, but watching him with absolute trust. "Come and take her," Trafford said quietly. Dalton's men began to dismount, hands moving toward their weapons. The air crackled with imminent violence. Then a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "United States Marshal, nobody move." Every head turned. A woman rode into the street on a gray mare, a silver badge gleaming on her chest. 2 deputies flanked her, rifles across their saddles. She was lean, hard-eyed, with auburn hair pulled back beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Sarah Garrett, U.S. Marshal," she announced, "and I've got federal warrants that say this show's over." Marshal Garrett dismounted with deliberate calm, her deputies covering the crowd. She pulled 3 folded papers from her coat and held them up. "Cyrus Dalton, you're under arrest for fraud, claim jumping, and the murders of Thomas Reed and Henry Kovac. Her voice rang clear across the street. "Judge Samuel Crane, you're under arrest for bribery and corruption of territorial office. Sheriff Porter, you're complicit in all of it." Dalton's face went purple with rage. "You have no authority here." "Federal warrant supersedes territorial law," Garrett interrupted. "And I've got testimony from 6 minors, 3 widows, and a very helpful saloon owner." She nodded toward May, who stood on her porch with her arms crossed. "This is insane," Crane sputtered. "I'm a territorial judge." "You're a bought judge," Garrett said flatly. "Now dismount, all of you." Dalton's men looked at each other, uncertain. 12 against 3, but federal law was different. Killing a marshal brought the full weight of Washington down on you. "Bring out Rose Kimball," Garrett ordered, looking at Trafford. Trafford nodded to May, who disappeared inside. A moment later, Rose emerged, small and frightened, but standing straight. She walked to Trafford's side. Garrett approached her gently. "Rose, did you agree to marry Mr. Dalton?" "No, ma'am." Rose's voice shook but held firm. "Did anyone ask your consent?" "No, ma'am." "Did you want this marriage?" Rose looked directly at Dalton, and something fierce burned in her eyes. "I'm too small to be his wife. I'll always be too small." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Garrett turned to Crane. "Your marriage certificate is void. This contract was made under duress and involves a minor without proper consent." She gestured to her deputies. "Arrest them, all 3. Dalton lunged from his horse toward Rose, rage twisting his features. "You little—" Trafford moved like lightning, his fist connected with Dalton's jaw, dropping him to the mud. "Stay down," Trafford said quietly. The deputies moved in with shackles. Dalton, Crane, and Porter were bound and dragged toward the jail. Frank Kimball tried to slip away through the crowd, but townspeople blocked his path and shoved him forward. "Take him too," Garrett said. "Selling a child is trafficking." As the prisoners were led away, Dalton screamed threats and curses, but no one listened anymore. Trafford's hand finally left his gun. He'd never fired a shot.
Marshal Garrett arranged for Rose to travel to Rapid City, where a family she trusted would take her in until she came of age. Rose packed the few belongings she had, including the scraps of paper covered in her careful handwriting. On the morning she was set to leave, Rose found Trafford on May's porch, watching the sun rise over the Black Hills. "I never thanked you properly," Rose said quietly. Trafford shook his head. "Don't need thanks." "Why did you do it?" she pressed. "Why risk everything for me?" Trafford was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough with old pain. "Had a sister, Sarah. She was 15 when our father arranged her marriage to a rancher twice her age. She begged him not to do it, said she was too small, too young." He paused. "Father didn't listen. She was dead within a year. Died giving birth to a baby that didn't survive either." Rose's hand found his. "I'm sorry." "I couldn't save her," Trafford said, "but I could save you." Rose embraced him tightly, and for a moment Trafford allowed himself to hold on, to feel like maybe, just maybe, he'd made something right in this world. Then she rode away with Marshal Garrett, heading toward a future she could choose for herself. 5 years later. Trafford sat in the Lucky Strike, same table, same whiskey. May set down a newspaper beside him, the Tribune. "Page 5, she said with a smile. He turned to it and found an article, "Corruption in the Dakota Territory," by Rose Kimball, special correspondent. The saloon door opened. Trafford looked up. Rose stood there, 21 now, confident, wearing a traveling suit and carrying a leather satchel stuffed with notebooks. Her eyes found his and lit up. "Hello, John." He stood slowly, a rare smile breaking across his weathered face. "Rose." She crossed to him and set a stack of published articles on the table, exposés on claim jumpers, corrupt officials, men like Dalton. "You taught me something," Rose said. "Being small doesn't mean being powerless. It means you have to be smarter, braver, louder." She touched his arm. "You gave me a voice. Now I'm using it." Trafford looked at the woman she'd become, strong, purposeful, unafraid. "Your sister would be proud," Rose said softly, "of what you did." Trafford nodded, something heavy finally lifting from his chest. "Maybe." Rose smiled. "I have to catch a train, more stories to write." She squeezed his hand. "But I'll come back." "I'll be here." She walked out into the sunlight, and Trafford watched her go, not with sadness, but with peace. He'd saved one, and she'd saved herself the rest of the way. That was enough. Rose was too small to be a wife, but big enough to change the world. Subscribe for more stories where courage defies the odds and justice wins.